taxes can only reach up to a point, they can only become so high before the behavioural change of the people being taxed actually begins to reduce the amount the government can take in, because they are, again, so motivated to not pay these really onerous taxes.
Yeah. According to new analysis from the tax lawyer Dan Needle, the Scottish Government's decision to raise the top rate of income tax could have backfired. HMRC figures now appear to suggest that Scotland's increases in the top rate of income tax, culminating in a rise to 48% in April 2024, could have cost Holyrood about £22 million of lost tax in its first year alone. Data suggests that high earners took steps to avoid entering into that high earner bracket. So, could this loss of tax earnings serve as a warning for Andy Burnham? Alice Wright is money reporter with the Times and Sunday Times. Well, tell us a little bit more. I think particularly intriguing are the ways and means that people might have used completely legally to avoid paying a top rate of tax.
Of course. So what we're talking about here is avoidance, as you said, perfectly legal, different from evasion, illegal. What we're seeing here is when tax becomes so punitive, people are so motivated to get out of that tax bracket, so they'll do all sorts of things. We're seeing people reduce their hours. We're seeing people refuse promotions. We're seeing perhaps people actually moving across the border from Scotland back to the UK, where that higher rate of tax comes down to 45.
Wow, but commuting to the same job.
Yes,
the other
also
side.
refusing to take jobs over the border in Scotland if their firm has maybe an office up there and they've been given a promotion and asked to move up there. We're seeing more reticence there, but also things like using salary sacrifice more to bring down their taxable income. So very sensible things like using your pension, using a cycle to work scheme, all sorts of things that are good for the consumer, not so good for the government's coffers.
Right, and put into context what £22 million of lost tax is. I mean, it's a huge amount of money, but actually, in terms of mass tax revenue, it's not a huge amount of money, is it?
It's not. Obviously, Scotland has a smaller tax base, so it's bigger proportion of their overall intake, so it is important, but what it mostly signifies is that we are reaching this principle called the Laffer curve. So this was named after the economist Arthur Laffer, who his theory suggested that taxes can only reach up to a point, they can only become so high before the behavioural change of the people being taxed actually begins to reduce the amount the government can take in, because they are, again, so motivated to not pay these really onerous taxes.
Yeah. But it's very interesting, Alice, what you say about the methods and means, because this is people choosing not to earn the money in the first place. It's not people earning the money and then finding schemes or different places to put that money which might be more tax effective. They are changing their own behaviour because they don't want a government to get hold of that money. Those are two different mindsets, aren't they?
They are two different mindsets, and it's something that we see around different cliff edges that we have in the UK tax system as well. So once you're earning over 100k, you fall into a sort of 62% tax break before you hit, again, the 45% at 125k, and you lose all sorts of benefits like your childcare allowance. So we see the same kind of behaviours, people refusing promotions, upping pension contributions, trying to earn less, and that's overall bad for the economy and bad for the tax intake, because there's just less money going around the system, and we all need that for growth.
Sure, but you have to have tax bands if you're going to charge different amounts of tax. It's got to be somewhere, hasn't it?
It does, and I suppose that's a perennial question, something that will certainly be on Andy Burnham's mind and on his team's mind. But we do have very harsh cliff edges in the UK system, and this is something that experts that we speak to on a weekly basis continue to point out. And we get endless analysis and data showing that people bunch up at the end of these tax brackets, and as I say, that's just not something that is good for aspiration and good for pushing up wages and good for growth.
Yeah, I mean, there are other ways and opinions about paying high rate tax, and Gary Lineker was fronting "We're millionaires, we're all happy to pay" kind of campaign last week. So Andy Burnham's got a lot of different voices to listen to, hasn't he?
He has, yes. So I think what you're referring to is the Patriotic Millionaires campaign, who would like to see a 2% wealth tax on any wealth over £10 million. Sounds like a great idea. Again, most tax experts have debunked that this would work. Anyone with £10 million is already quite a mobile person, and is very easy for them to take that wealth usually elsewhere. It's very hard to implement. It's very hard to collect. It will probably just push people away. So he can certainly listen to the Gary Linekers of the world, but I think the Dan Needles of the world have something else to say entirely.
Yes, I think Dan's memo may hit the desk with slightly more of a thud. Do we compare very unfavourably to other countries when it comes to very, very high earners paying tax? Are we a bad place to come as a high earner?
We have such a complex tax regime that it would be hard to say, because we have income tax, property taxes, etc., etc. What I will say is that places like the US, their highest rate tax band is lower than our current rate tax band. I think it's 40%, and it starts at earnings over $400,000, which is just incomparable to the $125,000 band that we have today. And it's not just part of this, but it is largely part to the fact that we're in a 10-year freeze for income tax bands. So this started in 2021. At the moment, they're going to stay where they are until 2031. Obviously, we've had years of high, if not double-digit inflation. And that's meant that as wages have gone up and the price of everything has gone up, our income bands have stayed the same, so many, many more of us are being pushed into just paying higher rates of tax.
But that has benefited the Treasury enormously, hasn't it? Because it just means that without actually announcing an increase in income tax, you are taking much more money away from working people. That is a fascinating statistic about the $400,000, because it just changes the notion of rich, really, doesn't it?
It does, and I should note that I'm talking about federal taxes, and the US system obviously is governed by state taxes as well, and they vary across the country. But yes, the income tax bands are much higher elsewhere.
OK. If you were Andy Burnham, which bar would you raise or lower? I mean, there is a lot of talk, and he has made a point of saying when he knocked on doors, the initial personal allowance for taxation was something that people wanted to talk to him about, and he was very happy to listen to.
Absolutely. We do know that that is on his mind, and that would affect all taxpayers unless he decided to introduce, that it wouldn't affect anyone earning over X amount, that they had their personal allowance withdrawn or something like that. But we all get that £12,570 of tax-free money that we can earn each year. If that were to be raised, that would affect all of us. It would get more money into our accounts every month. However, someone is going to have to pay for that. And as we know, the state of the public finances is not geared up at the moment for freebies, so it's tough choices ahead. Right.
Do you get a very full mailbag and email inbox when you talk about higher rate tax?
Absolutely, we do. Anyone who is earning over £50,570 is paying that higher rate tax of 40%. It's really quite punitive for a wage that doesn't go particularly far anymore. And then what we get a lot of complaints about is what I alluded to earlier, which is when you're earning over £100,000, and because you start to have your personal allowance withdrawn and other benefits, you slip into paying 62% rate of income tax. And economists and tax experts have been pointing to this cliff edge for a while, and it's certainly something that we get endless comments, emails and letters about every week.
Yeah, more tax than you're taking home. Ouch. Alice, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much indeed. That's Alice Wright, money reporter for The Times.